For if this God to whom we pray is Father, and yes, I know the word Father is problematic for those whose experience of earthly fathers has been destructive and abusive, and for all of us who have laboured rather too much from an oppressively patriarchal grip on life.
Greetings, everyone. So that was Stephen Cottrell, the Archbishop of York, saying that the beginning of the Our Father prayer, which of course starts Our Father, is slightly problematic. That's the latest in what's been going on in the Anglican Church. Of course, this was already an idea that was suggested before. It's something that the Church of England wanted to look into. And now, of course, the Archbishop of York, who, by the way, is one of the kind of head figures in the Church. I mean, the Church of England doesn't per se have a head like we have the Pope, but they do have figures that are considered kind of at the top of the Church, and he is one of them as the Archbishop of York. They've got the Archbishop of Canterbury, Justin Welby, who I'll mention a little later. They've got the Archbishop of York. I would say the Bishop of London is probably also quite high up. So when the Archbishop of York is saying that essentially means that someone very important in the C of E hierarchy is suggesting that perhaps we change the Our Father to something else, maybe our Creator or our gender-neutral God, that I know some Christians are already doing. Of course, this did get some criticism, thankfully. Here's a tweet from Calvin Robinson, who is a member of the Free Church of England. He was kind enough to come on here and have a chat with me on this channel. Here's what he had to say. We call it the Lord's Prayer because it is the prayer the Lord gave us. He taught us to pray it. We call God our Father because that is how he instructed us to address him. Is the Archbishop saying Christ was wrong, that God made a mistake? Well, yeah, I mean, this is essentially in the Gospel. Now, I know that Protestants threw some books out of the Bible, but as far as I'm aware, they did not touch the Gospel. They may have some odd interpretations of it, but I don't think they've thrown anything out of it. It is, however, fairly clear in the Gospel that Jesus teaches us this prayer. He actually says this prayer and starts it with Our Father. I think it tells us God's preferred pronoun is He. I mean, God isn't a He as we are, people, but that's how he has asked us to address him, through Jesus Christ, who's one of the three persons of God. But of course, none of this is surprising because despite only being in the middle of the year, we've already had a number of crazy things happening in the C of E. It all began at the beginning of the year with the news that the Church of England had ordained their first ever non-binary priest named Bingo Allison. Yes, that's correct, you heard me. Bingo Allison. Bingo Allison, a man with a wife and 3 children, decided at some point that he was not a woman, but non-binary. Oddly enough, despite deciding that he was now non-binary, he chose to dress as a woman. I've never quite understood that. I don't know what a non-binary person is supposed to dress as. Perhaps they're supposed to mix it, have a bit of both. But he decided to have long hair and wear a skirt and dress as a woman and be referred to as non-binary. And that was completely in line with the teaching of the Bible, as he said, because he actually explains in this video how God has created a number of genders.
This amazing bit, Genesis 1:27, which says, male and female, he created them. And I fixated right on this and I kept coming back to this and I thought I better look up what this and really means. And I looked at this and it's like, it's not and, it's kind of two. So it's like from maleness to femaleness, he created them. And I knew then that I could live in this and. I could live in this middle ground, and I could live in this place where God accepted me and created me right from the beginning. And I felt God moving through me and guiding me through all the texts that I read. And I had to stop and pray every 20 minutes, 200 words. Then I stopped and I had to have a quick pray and a bit of a shout at God, and then I carried on going. And from then on, I knew that God loved me. I was God's beloved non-binary child. that they had created me for change and transformation, just like everybody is created for change and transformation, and that God would walk with me every step of the way.
Later on in the year, the Church of England also decided to permit same-sex blessings. As you may well have heard by now, they the bishops overwhelmingly voted for same-sex blessings. There are actually kind of three houses, if you like, in the C of E who vote on this issue. And the other two, I think, are clergy, remaining clergy, and also lay people. And they get a vote, and they also voted for it, but it was quite close. Whereas in the bishop's vote, it was overwhelming. It was like well over 90% of them voted for same-sex blessing. And this included, of course, the Archbishop of Canterbury, the Archbishop of York, and the Bishop of London. But this wasn't enough for some. Some people felt that they should have permitted same-sex marriages. The head of that was a man named Peter Tatchell, who you may or may not have heard of. If you're outside the UK, you probably haven't. But he is a very pro-LGBT advocate, an activist, and he was protesting at Lambeth Palace with a number of people, unhappy that this was all that they got. And then, of course, the Archbishop of Canterbury, Justin Welby, decided to come over to him and grovel and essentially apologise and say this is the best they can do right now.
Can you understand just how painful and insulting it feels when the church will bless dogs and guinea pigs and now has finally deigned to bless us, but not give us any more rights than dogs and guinea pigs?
Yes.
But isn't that shameful?
It is in a deeply divided church where we managed to get to. But as you know, as well as I do, the church in this country, let alone around the world, and all the global churches are completely divided on this. What we have tried to do is go as far as we can to get an answer now, which is what we've done. If we go any further, it's 3 years of legislative fighting and quite possibly a defeat at the end of it. I want to give you something. I don't want to give you. The bishops together want to do something that avoids that, and the discussion continues.
Right now, all we can do is give you blessings because it will take a long time if we want to put same-sex marriage through, and it might not go through. It's like he's saying, it's what we want. We want to do this for you, but we can't at the moment. It's a bit tricky. And he's going up to this guy, Peter Tatchell, and essentially saying, we're trying to give you what you want, but this is the most we can give you at the moment. It's truly pathetic to watch. Just to give you a little bit more insight as to who Peter Tatchell actually is, here are some of the things that he's done. He has advocated for lowering the age of consent for sex. He has advocated paedophilia. Well, he denies this, of course, but he essentially said that in some cases it's normal, maybe in some cultures, for a man to have sex with a boy, and that's kind of a way of initiating the boy into adult life. So he actually explained that it's not always a bad thing. Then later on, when he got a lot of pushback for it, he said, well, hold on a second, he didn't mean that. He's not saying that this is good. In most cases, it's been very bad when men have had sex with boys or children. But that he was just explaining that there are some instances where it isn't bad. So he's essentially left the door open for saying it's not always a bad thing. Sometimes adults can have sex with children and it's fine. He's very much against Christianity. He's no fan of Christianity. He's no fan of the church. That's why it surprises me that Archbishop Justin Welby went to grovel to him. Unsurprisingly, he's said some very negative things about Catholicism. He really doesn't like Pope Benedict, obviously, because Pope Benedict was very precise in what he taught about homosexuality, as the church teaches. Here he says Pope Benedict was essentially an unrepentant homophobe. That's ironic coming from Peter Tatchell, calling Pope Benedict unrepentant. If only he saw the irony in what he was saying. He actually made a documentary about Pope Benedict that was shown on Channel 4 when Pope Benedict was visiting the UK. Obviously a very negative one. He doesn't like the Pope, so he wasn't going to praise him. It's not surprising that Channel 4, that's a big channel here in the UK. It's one of the original channels that was in this country for a long time. before we had a whole multitude of channels to choose from, and it's still around, of course. They showed that hour-long almost documentary. He's just not a friend of the church. He's not a friend of Christianity. Oddly, in the Catholic Herald, one priest actually defended him, writing an article some years ago saying that he was a really nice guy, but he's not. He certainly isn't if you're a Christian. He doesn't like you. He does keep getting invited onto television. I think he's just been hired by the Metropolitan Police to assist them with some things. So it obviously doesn't seem to bother anyone in this country, in the mainstream, that he wants the age of consent for sex lowered, that he doesn't have a problem with men sleeping with children. I think one of the issues that the Church of England has when they're trying to pass some of these liberal laws is that they've still got quite a large evangelical older congregation who go to Mass regularly. They do give money, they put money in the basket, they probably make donations to the church, and they don't want to upset them too much. There's also a problem in Africa that they have, because a lot of people in the African Anglican Church, if that makes sense, they're not happy with this. They're not happy with these things, so they also have that issue to deal with. So they're just not able to push this through at the moment, but it's something that I'm sure they really want to do as soon as is possible. So that's the Anglican Church for you. That's kind of like a mid-year review of what's happening. And the latest thing is, a possible change to the Lord's Prayer, maybe, because some people might be triggered by the word Father if they've had some difficult relationships with men or maybe with their own father. Ah, dear me. Please do leave your comments. I'll have a read of them, and thanks for watching. Have a blessed day.
And the discussion continues.